So, this is Brittney Peach. She recently uploaded this video to TikTok when she was asked to attend a virtual meeting whilst working remotely for Cloudflare.
We have an important meeting today. We finished our evaluations of 2023 performance. This is where you have not met Cloudflare expectations for performance. We decided to part ways with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop you right there.
Brittney is on this call with two people that she's never met. Not her manager, not anybody that she's worked with, literally two random people from HR.
Why are you doing this and not my manager, we've never met, so this seems a little odd that my manager has no idea that this has been happening and the director has no idea that this has been happening.
I think it's always important that if you have to have difficult conversations, the people who have been managing and working with those people should do it directly. It's just so inhuman and gutless to just get somebody else to do it.
I can't, you guys have still not given me a reason why I'm being let go.
I think that pause, that silence from these people from HR when she asked for a reason says a lot. Letting people go in any situation is hard, but there really is no excuse for any circumstance where somebody is removed from a business with absolutely no warning, no prior communication, and I really feel for her.
I have not received any negative inclination. I have not been put on a performance improvement plan, nothing.
And I cannot speak to what your manager has communicated to you directly.
I really think that is outrageous and in many ways the worst part of this. I think for Brittney to have no communication before this about a problem in her performance, that's one thing, but for the HR people to dismiss the comments and the engagement of the manager, the manager is the one person who should have an idea as to what her performance is like.
Do you guys even know? Why, who you're talking to each day? Every single 10, 15 minutes, do you guys even know who you're talking to?
I hear you and what you're saying.
It just doesn't make any sense that you guys have still not been able to give me a reason why I'm being let go.
But I actually feel a bit for these guys who are doing the firing. These guys have just been given a crappy job by what sounds like a fairly inhuman company. Now, Brittney obviously had a terrible experience as a remote worker, but I suspect that the problems with Brittney's story and other remote workers happened a long time before that video was made. Remote working is a great opportunity. I have remote teams in my company and I manage remote staff. I think that what's particularly good about remote is that it gives companies access to a pool of talent far bigger than their local geography. And of course, it allows talented individuals to work from anywhere in the world and travel and live in some incredible locations without having to sacrifice their career or their development. But like all things, there are good stories and bad stories. There are right ways to do it and wrong ways to do it. Life as a remote worker isn't all just sitting on beaches and sipping cocktails. It can be difficult to work remotely, and it can also be really hard to manage remote teams if you don't approach it correctly. But today, I just want to focus on the rules and top things that I know about running and leading remote teams. Just before we get into that, I wanted to ask you a quick favor. We're here making videos and other forms of content about careers, startups, entrepreneurship, and it would be really, really helpful if you would at least consider subscribing to this channel. Every subscriber that we have helps us make more content and it would be really great, so thank you. So here are my top 10 rules for managing and leading remote teams. Firstly, I think you have to be honest with yourself. Managing any team successfully is a lot of work, but managing a remote team requires you to make some very significant investments in infrastructure and process and make some real effort. And some people just can't be bothered. They just don't have the bandwidth and they don't see enough upside, and that's okay. I've seen some really good, well-performing companies struggle to move past the idea that an employee needs to be seen physically in the office, sat at their desk, so that you know that they're working. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I think you need to seriously consider if your company is right for remote. Are your managers going into it with their eyes wide open of the challenges and special requirements of managing remote people? And if they're not, and if it's not for you, that's absolutely fine. Focus instead on building the very best in-house team that you possibly can. Remote isn't for every company and it's not for every person, and that's okay. If, however, it is for you, then we need to get off to a good start. And that is all about the right recruitment. You're going to want to design and create a recruitment process specifically for your remote roles. The type of person, key attributes, values are going to be different for a remote worker versus an in-house worker for the same role. the skill sets are slightly different. In my companies, we have an entire recruitment process that in its first instance is designed to filter out people who we do not believe are suitable for remote work with our company. Everything from their setup, their environment, their experience, their time zone, their personal values, all of these things are factored in to the early part of our recruitment process. You're going to develop and coach this person very differently to how you would develop and coach somebody in-house. So think about their communication style, think about how you might influence this individual. In my experience, about 70% of the remote working formula comes down to the right recruitment. Don't underestimate it, and make sure you spend plenty of time thinking about and designing the right recruitment process. Next, set expectations. The video we watched at the start was the perfect example of what happens when you fail to set and communicate the correct expectations. It is critical that you are clear on what success looks like and that your remote worker fully understands what you expect from them. This is about a lot more than KPIs. It's about processes, communication, and behaviors. Also ask, what are you going to do to maximize the chance of this relationship working and for them to thrive at your company? A lot of this can be handled with a really well thought through and designed onboarding process. If you have remote workers already, then ask yourself, do they understand your expectations? If you don't think that you're aligned on that, then take some action right now to address it. Next up, processes. When everyone's in a physical office, things can happen a lot more ad hoc. You'll communicate, share knowledge, share experiences, answer questions, and just engage far more than you might even realize. Even lazy teams and poor managers with bad cultures in an office can get the very basics of communication right. So how do you get around that? Well, you have to design processes with it in mind of how do you do these things when you're not in the same space. Now, the good news is that the pandemic and the subsequent tsunami of remote workers also brought about a huge uptick in the development and availability of collaborative remote tools. Tools like Microsoft Teams or Slack, Zoom and Google Workplace make video calls easier than ever, and there is practically a limitless list of options when it comes to project management and cloud document tools. Now, processes doesn't just mean tech tools, it's what happens and when. You need a clear set of processes or rules or flows that are stuck to like glue. What days and times do you meet? What happens if something goes wrong when someone's in a different time zone? What happens if a remote worker has a personal issue, a connection problem, or something else unforeseen? You basically need to think about all the different things that could happen for a remote worker and then design solutions and processes and tools to allow you to deal with that situation and support that worker and help them do the very best job they can do to deliver exactly what it is you need for your company. Next up, targets. Targets are the most important thing when it comes to managing any team or organization, but it is practically impossible to be successful with remote workers without targets. Setting really great, clear targets gives you so much. It gives you accountability. It gives you focus on the right things. It means that your team is focused on output, not input. Now, the warning here is bad targets, bad lazy targets from people who don't really understand how to set good goals and aren't aware of the risks. Set the wrong target and measure the wrong thing, then you get the wrong behavior. The guy who works for me now, he's a remote worker. He's a super valuable member of my team, but he worked remotely for a corporate before, and I know for a fact that he would literally wake up at 8:58 in bed and move the mouse on his laptop so that it pressed the right button so the manager knew that he was working, and then he'd just roll over and go back to sleep or grab a coffee or whatever it might be. He's now a super valuable, very engaged member of my team and as valuable as anybody. And the difference is partly culture and communication as well as targets, but the key takeaway here is set targets and goals and everything else becomes exponentially easier. Communication. A big problem with the video right at the start with Brittney was poor communication. You really have to do so much more to correctly communicate with remote workers. It takes up a huge amount of bandwidth and really requires a very, very, very top-down commitment to doing it well. The first mistake I see is people using too much email, a lot of instant chat, and not enough video calls. When you're in a physical space together, just from a personable, common courtesy point of view, there are just lots of conversations that where the right thing to do is to have them face to face. When it comes to remote work, and actually this is also a problem in offices, bad managers and bad leaders are too quick to just tap away on the keyboard and give bad news or be aggressive to people. I think when managing remote people, you should have in your head that the order that you use your different communication channels are absolutely number one, video call. You can't video call enough. Number two is audio call, still a conversation between people. Number 3 is chat, instant messages, still engagement, and a format that we're all very used to now. 4 is your project management tool and shared documents, so you are literally collaborating on things. And the 5th thing, the least powerful method of communication that you have when managing remote people, is something like email. It's really, really not a good tool for remote workers. If you've got remote workers and you only take one thing away from today, please have more video calls with them. One-to-ones, in groups, team calls, just those video calls and that face-to-face engagement and face-to-face interaction is really powerful and goes a long way. Of course, it's even better if you meet up in person. Just because someone is a remote worker doesn't mean that you can't from time to time meet in person. This all comes down, of course, to locations and circumstances and budgets. But if you can, meet up in person. It's a great way to build those relationships and solidify the relationships between different people in the company. I recall a colleague of mine was working in the US, and she woke up one morning to this series of progressively more aggressive emails that she received from her manager. Her manager was furious that she hadn't completed this given task, and she wasn't even ignorant to the time zone difference. She just felt that it was the most important thing for her, so she was going to send these aggressive emails until she got a response. Of course, my colleague was waking up at the start of her day, 8 hours difference, and the first thing she was getting was a load of abuse and aggressiveness from her manager. Now, in this particular case, the manager was an arsehole to people in the office as well. But the point is that you need to understand people have got different priorities and in different circumstances, and adapt your communication style accordingly. Beyond the very basics that we've talked about so far, I would just encourage you to design a communication process and a communication system. Next, develop a business brain. When people are in an office together, they're constantly talking about things, sharing knowledge, asking questions, and building each other's understanding of the different roles and functions around the business. When you have remote workers who are isolated at their desk or wherever it is they are, you really can't do that. Faced with this problem at one of my companies, we decided the best way to do this was to develop a business brain that contained all of the information about every single thing in the company. There are lots of off-the-shelf wikis or tools like Notion or Tetra. Any of those are good. Just pick one. This is such a good idea that I actually did an entire video about the business brain, and there's a link to that video in the description below. But for now, let me give you the basic. A central business brain contains everything about your business. Everything from people to processes, targets, technical specifications, financial policies. Every single thing that you can imagine, every piece of information, tangible information about your company goes into your business brain. Now, one of the benefits of this is that you can stop answering the same question over and over again. When people ask questions, you can say, go and look in the brain, go and find this information for yourself. It's there and it's available. It also means that if somebody leaves, then everything they know is already documented and is already here. So if someone leaves suddenly, you have no issue. If somebody leaves with poor handover notes or doesn't do a good handover, as always seems to be the case, then it doesn't matter. You've already got that information. You'll probably find that your teams quickly become more self-sufficient. They are better at going and getting the information they need rather than just asking somebody else for it. And crucially, it means that your remote workers have access to all the information they might possibly need, even if they're working at a time of day where everybody else in the organization is asleep. Business brain. Give it a go. It will change your business more than you think. Next, remote culture. Culture is such a big topic that, in fact, I can only touch on a very, very small amount of it here today. As far as remote culture goes, and culture in relation to what we're talking about today, here are some key things to know. Culture is not what you write in your handbook or what you put on the walls. It's what you reward, it's who you promote, and it's how people feel that they've been treated when they're at your company. A lot of people think that culture is just a byproduct of the people in the business. If you have 10 people with 10 personalities, then you take 10% of each of their personality and that creates your culture. That's completely wrong because it misses a really important point, which is that great culture isn't a byproduct of people. It is design. Most organizations get the initial building blocks right. They set a mission, they set some values and some behaviors that they think are right for their company. But where they go wrong is they don't live and breathe those building blocks. Out of everything when it comes to managing remote people, culture is the most difficult. We already touched on something really important for remote culture when we talked about targets. Making sure you have coherent targets that mean the remote worker can directly see how them hitting their targets and achieving their tasks contribute to the bigger picture is a really important part of remote culture. Making sure that they feel like they're part of a business and that business is all pulling in the same direction. That's a really important foundation stone for remote culture. Having things like regular all-hand sessions shows those remote workers how the things they do interact with and contribute to the overall company mission. The nicer side of remote culture actually comes a lot into my next point: rewards. One of the most powerful things that helps form culture is when a group of people work together in the common pursuit of overcoming obstacles, solving problems, and achieving a goal. Once a group has gone through that, solve problems and achieve success, it creates a positive experience in their brain they tap into in future in order to understand how to be successful again. One massive part of this that helps solidify that positive experience and create this warm feeling that contributes in some way to culture is by celebrating success. So ask yourself, when it comes to your remote teams, how can you celebrate success? How can you break down barriers and allow them to be part of the wider success of the business and feel like they're part of one big team? Obviously, bonuses of various types are a part of how we celebrate success and reward people. Promotions are another. It's really important that you understand the goals and aspirations for your remote workers, just like you would in-house staff, so that you can help give them a path towards what it is that they want to achieve. One other thing to consider: say thank you, show gratitude, be pleasant. You'll be surprised at how harsh and how isolated it could feel being a remote worker when all you're ever receiving from your manager or leadership is one task after another. A thank you, a smile, a virtual pat on the back goes a long way. Be a human. This is last but certainly not least. A lot of management problems can be solved by people being more human. Most managers would be 10 times more effective if they had greater levels of self-awareness and more empathy towards other people. When people work remotely, as a manager, you have even less of an idea about what's going on with them. You don't have the same cues that you have in a physical space. So you need to work even harder to understand them, to be supportive, to be flexible. Another thing to think about, just a small thing, but when you're in an office and it's somebody's birthday, everyone clubs together and they get a card and a cake and they sing happy birthday. You can do that virtually. There's no reason why you can't send somebody something, either for a birthday or just as a thank you or to recognize some great work. Don't allow the fact that they're not in an office or not physically sat next to you limit the creativity and the effort that you put into the relationship with them. The better you do that, the more attached they'll feel to the business, the more they'll offer, the more likely they are to stay, and the better they'll perform. So there you have it, my top 10 tips for running a remote team and how your company can do it right and not end up like the video we saw right at the start. There was a lot in there, so just remember that managing remote teams is hard, and being a remote worker is also hard. Do everything with intent. Design the right processes and the right experience, and you've got a good chance of being successful. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.